Alright, this video is going to be a little more off the cuff than even my usual videos are, which is saying a lot. What I want to talk about today is ways that different games engage with the medium and like the fact that they are games rather than games that kind of try to escape the medium or like overcome it. Now, what am I talking about? I think a very obvious example of this is visual novels. I don't hate visual novels. There's a few that I've played and I've liked, and I do plan to try more. And I'm not even saying that they aren't games, but just that they're using the artistic devices that books and like just other forms of literature have, rather than the devices at their disposal because they're video games. Like, obviously, all visual novels pretty much have some amount of agency where you can like choose how you react to certain things that happen, but these are pretty few and far in between, and generally you're much more focused on just kind of reading the story as it happens and experiencing it. So yeah, I don't hate visual novels, but they are a good example of ways that games kind of don't play into what games are. I think another example of this, and one that I've talked about a lot, and I will talk about more in this video, is games like Uncharted, or just kind of that signature like Sony AAA style, where it's not really about seeing like how you can interact with games. It is more about, what if you were in the movie? And then the actual gameplay mechanics themselves are kind of just, how can we like get you through this epic explosion driving scene, and like what tools do you need to get through that so that you can feel like you're the hero in the movie instead of just a guy on your couch. And it's interesting with Uncharted because I think maybe I'm misinformed somehow, but I feel like it definitely did spawn from Tomb Raider. Basically, they're like the same series, just one is older. And the point of Tomb Raider, I would argue, is a bit more video game based. It obviously was starting to like slide into that movie spectacle type of idea, but also the idea was like, look at these like 3D worlds we can create for you to experience within a video game. And I would argue that that is kind of playing with the medium rather than trying to be a movie like Uncharted is. And now the issue isn't just squarely the fact that Uncharted is like linear and you can't really choose your path, because plenty of games are like that. Pretty much every platformer, besides like I guess Sonic and stuff, that like has multiple paths. Like, but in the average like Mario game, you kind of just, you proceed through it one way. You can't choose. The game is bringing you along for the ride in the same way that Uncharted is, where, when it wants you to be in the fire world, you're going to go into the fire world and you'll have abilities based on that or whatever. The difference, however, is that in Mario, you can tell that the jumping was designed first, and then the world was designed in surface of the jumping. So we have this character that runs, jumps, shoots fireballs. What kind of things can we put him into that will be engaging and fun for the player and interesting? And that, I think, is a game being an actual game sort of design philosophy. Whereas, like I said, with Uncharted, it's more, okay, we want this scene where like a bunch of cliffs fall down and you're driving under them and then you do a backflip and then you shoot a bunch of guys. So we need to give you the ability to shoot. We need to set up half-baked driving mechanics in our game so that you can feel cool doing all that. And I think my issue with these games is not that they exist at all. It's more the place that they have within the gaming community. Like, the reverence that people feel for them is a bit confusing for me, because I feel like as gamers, wouldn't you care more about the actual like gameplay and the design behind it rather than just like epic explosion? Like, there is obviously room for epic explosion type of stuff, but like, no like film buff is like, oh, I love Transformers and Marvel films. But every video game buff is like, yeah, I love Uncharted. I love The Last of Us. I love kind of like these Sony first party type titles where they aren't really celebrating what games are about. And obviously, like, there are people like me that push back against these, or like, it's not an uncommon take to say that these games aren't your kind of thing, but then you're seen as like the like normie one who can't like appreciate high art. Where I'd argue like some game like A Short Hike is much more high art for video games than Uncharted could ever be. Uncharted is more like a Captain Underpants book or something. Where with A Short Hike, it's like, it's very much based around the fact that you are climbing up this hill, and the mechanics, like, as you progress, you get more jumps, which lets you go up bigger hills, and your character themselves is like struggling with identity and like what they're doing here and stuff. And it's not like a movie that is like A Short Hike could never be made, but it would be much more like a tale about these characters going on a journey. Whereas in A Short Hike, the writing is charming and fun, but you're not really getting into the nitty gritty about what these characters are feeling. It genuinely is a story about like kind of learning to engage and learning to like move around your environment and exploring and being curious and being open to new experiences. Because like in A Short Hike, there isn't one linear path up the hill. There's plenty of different feathers you can get, and there's different orders you can get them in. It just kind of depends on, where you're going and when you find stuff. And I think that is just a much more respectable way to format a game or like approach game design, rather than being like, this is what has been cool and epic in the past. Let's just put that into a game and make it work somehow. And I think also even simpler games like Kirby and stuff, I wouldn't necessarily always consider them high art in the same way like A Short Hike obviously is. We all agree. Some Kirby games definitely get there. Like I'd say Kirby's Dream Land 3 is definitely like a statement on the SNES and just 2D gaming in general. It's a beautiful game. I definitely think that one gets there. Kirby 64 too, I think, is, another visually really appealing game, and it takes the gimmick of your copy abilities kind of to the max, letting you combine them. Not that that one is like high art in the same way that Kirby's Dream Land 3 is, but it is a very interesting way to approach the game and like design it around all these different abilities that Kirby can have. I think Kirby is a good example of taking joy in what video games are rather than in what you could make them be. Like there's really no story in Kirby. Obviously there's like some sort of eldritch horrors happening and creepy eyeball monsters and King Dedede's there and Meta Knight's edgy, but like they're, they don't really talk or do anything or have any goals more complicated than like eat food or go right. And that is really what the medium of video games is about, I think, is creating like an interesting kind of like tapestry or landscape to have the player engage with on their own terms. I'm not saying I'm never going to play Uncharted or games like that. I might at some point. I could be talked into it. If you leave a long enough comment and leave 5 of them in a row and like the video and hype it, maybe I'll play Uncharted. But I think just in general, I'm more inspired by art that is born out of like limitations and using what you have in front of you, rather than games that are about kind of like abundance and like, we have this super powerful machine, let's push it to its absolute limit. Like, I don't think there's really any need to do that. I don't think realism looks better than any other art style. I think it, in a lot of ways, it looks worse because you can't do it, like you can do cell shading and no one's going to be like, that's not cell shaded enough, or no one's going to be like, that's not storybook enough. You need to make it more doodly. But with realism, you're never going to get there. You're chasing just like a pointless end. And I get that, like, kind of in the butterfly effect of things, that also is why we have shorter shorter loading times and things like that. So it's not that there is zero utility in pushing hardware, because those kinds of interests are what get us stronger hardware, but also, I don't know. I feel like my Game Boy Advance is going to outlast my PS5 in terms of like how the hardware holds up. I don't know. Maybe I'd rather just have a simpler machine that has cooler games on it rather than a cooler machine that has more obvious, straightforward games on it. And it's like, what are the prices that we pay? Not literally. I mean, I guess kind of literally, but also like just the costs of this are like, games take so long to develop now because developers feel like every scene has to be this insane spectacle, and like it's like they don't trust people's attention spans unless there's constantly like explosions and some epic thing happening, or just like some super intense story beat going on. Whereas in reality, the games that I feel like hook us the most are games that just focus on the gameplay and the game loop and like giving you reasonable goals and motivations to continue playing. I think like roguelikes, for example, are another good example, kind of like Kirby, of games going in the opposite direction. And, obviously with both of these, it can be taken a little too far. Like, you should put a little bit of thought into your game world and stuff. Like, I think it's nice to have some nice lore, some good character designs, and obviously Kirby does that very well, and a lot of roguelikes do that very well as well. But with games like, Slay the Spire or Balatro, which are games we both talked about on this channel before, they're not going for epic moments at all. These games will make you feel like a puny little loser sometimes, especially if you're, just not making the greatest choices, or even if you just get unlucky, these games will be like, whatever. Like when you're going through Uncharted, you are the chosen one who is going to save the world. When you're playing Slay the Spire, you might die on the second level, and then the game's just like, get back out there, do it again. And you do. So you don't need to be made to like feel epic, and like, I'm saying epic way too much in the video. That's supposed to be a serious critique, but whatever. You don't need to be made to feel like cool and like the super important, all-powerful character all the time to be motivated to play a game. I'm just not interested in power fantasies in that sort of way. And I think games that just revel in the fact that they are games, gamers don't die, they respawn. You can keep trying, you can figure things out, you can learn new ways to play around with the mechanics. I think that is where games are at their best, and that is why I'm very disinterested in games like Uncharted. Thank you for watching. Let me know, what are your gaming takes? What are games that are not interesting to you? Like and subscribe.